All wings report in. Austin standing by.
Mike, standing by.
Austin standing by.
The Rogue 3 podcast is locked on target. Whether it's movies, shows, books, comics, or more, we're going to be coming to you from a galaxy far, far away to celebrate all things Star Wars. Hey guys, welcome to Rogue 3. In this episode, we are going to be covering the final arc of Andor Season 2. This is going to cover the aftermath of the Ghorman Massacre, the aftermath of Mon Mothma's speech, and it will lead us directly into the events of Rogue One. So let's go ahead and get started. What'd y'all think?
I like it. And we talked last week or last episode that the Gorman Massacre episodes felt like this is the finale. This is the big thing that happens. But I didn't it didn't lose a beat for me. It really carried it on, and I was really, really happy with how these last three episodes went when we knew that's going to be the big arc, the big thing, but this just picked it up for me and carried it even further.
It absolutely felt like an epilogue to the whole show on these last 3 episodes. The climax was certainly the Gorman Massacre, but it was exciting. It was fun, and it was fun to get some little flashbacks for Clea, and it was fun to, give her actress something to work with a little bit more. What about you, Austin? What'd you think?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I love these episodes. I think it was probably, not quite as, flawless as the arc before, but when we're like comparing it to perfection, that's really hard to it's not a fair comparison. I think it did a great job tying all the loose threads together. All of our remaining cast got good moments to have a moment to shine, and it really it's there's a lot of characters in the show. Like, I think it's we don't really think about, like, how big this cast is, and to give everybody, adequate, uh, finale is no easy feat, especially when this isn't a self-contained story. This is the story that bleeds right into another story, and that story is a prequel for yet another story. So there's a lot of layers to this, and that is not an easy thing to do. First of all, just to do it like adequately, but to exceed and make it so powerful and politically relevant and like actual art and not just content is a big feat, and they did amazing.
They absolutely did. It really You're right, it didn't feel like it felt like everyone's story was very fleshed out. Um, and it it's gonna be exciting to see how this continues to marinate, and I'm excited to introduce this into our, Rogue One rewatches whenever we do that. Let's go ahead and jump into the episodes. We have 3 episodes here. The first is Make It Stop, Who Else Knows, Jedha, Kyber, Erso. These were all written by Tom Bissell, and they were directed by Alonso Ruiz Palacios. We're sitting right here in 1 BBY, or as the show likes to call it, BBY1. We've been comparing this to Rebels a lot. We're kind of sitting towards the end of Rebels or at the very end of Rebels. The shows had been kind of neck and neck, but this series leads right into Rogue One, whereas Rebels ends a little bit before there. We see the Hera connection in Rogue One, and we'll dive into the actual Rogue One connections a little bit later. So what do you guys think of Make It Stop?
I think this was probably the best episode of this arc in my opinion. If you had told me in season 1 that one of my favorite episodes of the season was gonna be a Clay episode, I wouldn't have believed you, but, this was fantastic. It's very rare in Star Wars that we get a flashback. Like, I don't know if you guys remember when Last Jedi came out, it was, like, a huge deal that there were, like, flashbacks in that movie, and we still haven't seen a ton of those, in the shows since. But this Clay episode was fantastic. Luthen really got a great chance to shine. Really phenomenal Dedra stuff and Krennic stuff. But Clay, I think everybody will agree, was the real star of the show for this episode.
I think this episode is perhaps for the whole season or and even the whole series, my favorite acting episode. I thought the acting for this episode, while it's been phenomenal throughout the whole series, there were so many standouts here. Ben Mendelsohn being a standout, Elizabeth Dulau, I think is how her name is said. was just amazing and carried the episode when she's been a second fiddle to Luthen, been his assistant, you could say. But I think I said either last week or 2 weeks ago that Clea is as much Axis as Luthen is, and then we see maybe she's even a little bit more than half of what Axis was with the amount of time and effort that she puts into closing that loose end for the rebel side.
It's so fascinating to watch her closing that loose end with Luthen, and we'll get there in a second, but, um, let's go ahead and backtrack to one of the first scenes in the episode that is really fascinating, where Luthen and Lonnie Jung are sitting on a bench in the middle of the square, and they are talking about the Death Star project. I thought it was kind of interesting when he said that the project's name was Death Star. I was expecting them to bring up Stardust again.
That would have been a really good connection that I honestly hadn't thought about, but maybe it's already like whatever whatever Dedra has gotten access to is even further than just the plans on Scarif. It's even more inside the know.
And we do get our mention of Scarif here as well as Galen Erso, which is really cool. Lonnie is absolutely terrified, and he's kind of taken this extreme measure by looking at these plans, and he knows that now that he's looked at them, they're gonna go after him. And Luthen does not like that.
Think there's a lot that's to be said about this scene. Like, one of the biggest changes is that they're, like, in a park. They're, like, out in the open, just on the streets of Coruscant, and if you think back to season 1 when Luthen and Lonnie had their little meetups, it was like, go down this hallway, taking some stairs and an elevator, and, like, go d deep into the bowels where anyone could possibly see them. I think it's a pretty big show that things have changed. We are not where we were. Luthen is not top dog anymore. Um and having this conversation about, arguably the most evil thing the Empire's ever done, right in the face of the Empire is pretty bold.
I'm devastated because Lonnie was one of my favorite characters. We see him in season 1. We know he's a mole, but he doesn't do that much active stuff. He's more on the receiving end of Luthen's monologue, and that's how he stands out in season 1, but I thought season 2 did such a good job with him, and if anyone has the hardest go of it, Luthen talks about how hard it is for him to do what he's doing. Mon Mothma talks about how hard it is for her. Lonnie's the one that's most close to danger, and he's still making it work for years. He's on the inside as a mole leaking information, and that's incredible.
We go from this scene to Luthen and Clea agreeing to Luthen's going to go back to the shop and destroy the comms equipment, and Clea's supposed to go and get, I think, get the ship ready or something like that so they can get off world. Um, Leading us to the confrontation with Luthen and Dedra, which was that was pretty incredible. So much going on there. Luthen pouring the chemical over the switchboard, and Dedra showing up, and then having their little play acting, each pretending to be
Yeah,
ignorant. Yeah,
their little dance,
yeah,
right? Basically.
yeah. It was pretty incredible, and they have the whole conversation about the knife, the little Kit Fisto knife, um, and that you finally and you bring back the I forget what the device was from season 1, but it was like the whole thing. The first arc was about. The
The Star Path.
Star Path, yeah. And, she puts that on the table at that point, like, all pretense is gone, and it really is a nice callback to, Luthen is the person who tells Cassian to leave it, it's not important, and it was the thing that undid it years later.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought
I did
about
not
that.
even catch that. That was good.
Luthen's the one that tells him to leave it behind, and that is one of the linking pieces.
I feel like we always knew that Luthen would really do himself in. I think this is really, an example of him juggling too many balls here, and he dropped one, and it came back to haunt him. We see some other really cool Easter eggs. Obviously, we see Queen Amidala's headdress in there, which was really, really cool. We see a Gungan skull, which is absolutely mortifying. What's really cool is it has a symbol for Darth Revan on it, the Starforge symbol, which is very interesting. And we see the Mortis God slab. Did you guys have any other, Easter eggs in there that you caught?
No, those are 2 pretty big ones.
Uh,
Every little by little, Revan becomes a little bit closer to
a
canon.
little bit more canon. First, we had the name of a ship on Exegol, and now we have
Yep,
a
in a
symbol
reference book.
and a reference book, and now
Yep.
he's in a live action TV show with a little picture and a teensy tiny little bit that you would never notice.
I'll
Um,
say this is someone
I
that has 0 it's like 0 care for, those games, like, those games really don't mean a whole lot to me. My personal hope is that in canon, Revan is in fact that Gungan, and that is his actual skull.
I think I would die inside as a very, very big fan of those games.
Misa
It
Dark
is
Revan.
interesting. I'm gonna take this as a canonization of the Starforge. You know, why not?
Yeah, and I like that. It's a super weapon just like the Death Star is that
Yeah,
we're learning about this
that's true.
episode, and we've only seen, like, planet killer super weapons. We haven't really seen any other type of super weapons that
Yeah.
Legends had a whole bunch of. So I kinda like that as a reference of it might be around or was a thing at one point.
It's kinda the Starforge is kinda like a factory, kinda like the way, Palpatine gets all those ships on Exegol. It's almost like suddenly all these ships can come out of nowhere, which I think is kind of interesting.
And it very much pulls from a sun, like the power of
Mhm.
a star, very much
Sits right on
how
top.
Star Killer Base does that same thing, right?
Look at all these potential references just being thrown all over the place. We love it. That's what Star Wars is about, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Star Wars is also about sacrifice, which Luthen does. He tries to, basically he knows he's lost. He knows he's caught, and so he takes that Nautilus bleeder. And the turnaround is slow. And I can't help but think about Thanos saying you should have gone for the head.
That's a good call. That you're right, the turnaround, just like she's talking to him and he's just standing there, and you know something's up, and then she goes over to him, and just so much blood, so much blood. I feel like we kinda knew at that point that Luthen wasn't dead, but, it was still brilliant. And of course, they take Luthen away. Now, a big thing to note here is Dedra went on this mission without authorization. She is continuing to defy the orders that she'd been given because she has this need to defeat Axis. It's almost like Cyril's need to get Cassian. It's like this blind desire to destroy this very one specific enemy. And as Luthen points out to her, the rebels have all left. Like the rebels have flown throughout the rest of the galaxy and spread, and her going after just him is going to ultimately amount to nothing for her. And her blind ambition to get him is going to do nothing. And at this point, we have one of the most excellent sequences. The last half of the episode is all Clea. That thing is all Clea, and it is 100% awesome.
Yeah, we'd be remiss if we don't talk about the flashback scenes that happened during this episode with Clea and Luthen. We had heard from Tony Gilroy that we would hear more about his backstory and learn kind of how he came to be. And it's interesting watching the first flashback when he first finds Clea and he's fighting in a war, and we don't know what war it is, we don't know what side he's on. Although it's more backstory, we don't really get all of the answers. Again, as we talked about in previous episodes, spoon fed just directly to us. It's you get enough to understand a character's motivation, but it's not just everything that you could possibly know about the character just given right to you. And I really like that we get these little tidbits, these little moments that aren't a full explanation or someone spells it out and says, "This is why I'm doing it." It's very much we can make a little assumptions, we can learn a little bit more about those characters.
It is fascinating that we actually learn that Luthen's real name is not Luthen, or rather, that's I guess that could be his first name,
Yeah,
but
we don't hear his
we
first name yet.
we hear about him as Sergeant Lear. Immediately, I noticed that Lear is just Rail spelled backwards, or rather, Rail is just Lear spelled backwards, which I thought was kind of funny. Just bare bones attempt to hide his identity. And we see him. I don't know if adopting is the right word here, but we see him kind of taking Clea under his wing. Um, I've seen some people compare it to kind of a father-daughter relationship. I'm not sure that I see that exactly as a father-daughter relationship. I see it more as a master and apprentice relationship than
Well,
anything.
I think it was Elizabeth throughout Clay's actress. I think it was an interview she gave where she said it's not a father-daughter relationship because father-daughter relationships, it's like love is at the core and you have complicated feelings around it. She said that their relationship, she has like hate at the core because of what he did to her family, but she built like love and loyalty and things around like that core of hate. So I think that makes a very interesting dynamic. Really in the whole series, we see her be affectionate with Luthen like twice. Like we see her laugh at the end of the Senate gala when they were getting the spy equipment from the art. We see them laugh about killing Krennic, and then we see her say goodbye to Luthen as she
Right.
as she kills him later in the episode, and so it's definitely uh, a complicated relationship at the bare minimum.
They do go on from here. We do see she's very gifted at deceit when, they're kinda working their way through, I don't know if they were actually given the name of the planet, um, undercover though, and they're trying to hide their identities. We do ultimately see them, blow up some Imperials on Naboo, which is very exciting to get another appearance for Naboo.
Yeah, and they said I think it was Tony said in an interview that, they specifically chose Naboo because they said Luthen would want his first, like, rebel attempt to mean something, Naboo is the home planet of Palpatine, and
Mhm.
so that's why they chose Naboo.
You're
I love
saying it's not just because they wanted to go to Spain?
Yeah. Something tells me that might have been in the volume.
Uh, well, we see some excellent, excellent acting from, Clea here going into the hospital. Something I really of course, now we have Clea, she's kind of feigning injury and walking into the hospital, and she kinda disguises herself as a nurse or some kind of medical professional, and I love the little elderly alien that she's wheeling around who's just so helpless. Uh,
I love that that is an alien that we also saw in season 1 on Niamos. So it's like Andor doesn't have that many aliens, but they use that one in 2 separate instances, and it's good both times.
do we know the name?
I tried to look it up earlier and I did not find it. I'm not sure if it has a name in canon yet.
Another fun callback to her being from Mianos is when they're in the elevator, the music playing is another remix of the Mianos song that we've heard several times
That's
throughout the
even
show,
better.
and
Oh,
she's,
that's
like, humming
excellent.
it she's a little lady, but humming it to herself.
Oh, that's so good, I love it.
I saw
Um,
someone say that song is like the Gangnam Style of Star Wars, like, it's just everywhere.
it is really cool to watch Clay's facial expressions as she's talking to these various people. I'm watching them go between innocent and intense and just how quick it's flashing. Um, and she's really very talented, and I hope that we see more of her. I wanna see more of Clea, I wanna see more of this actress in general, but I really wanna see more of Clea. Live action, animated is okay too, because I really feel like she has a lot more to offer to Star Wars. I know she worked very hard leading up to Rogue One, but I could see her working more with the Rebellion, or even it'd be nice to see her hanging out after the Rebellion and just living her life. That'd be cool too.
I love that, yeah, Elizabeth Delau, it's like her first acting job, basically. She went to I think it's the Royal Academy in England for acting and had this right after graduating, right after getting out. And that's amazing to think she stepped out of school and into this and now is absolutely crushing it. I wouldn't be surprised if she gets nominated for an Emmy as for that episode
Best
because yeah,
supporting, here we come.
she did so good. I would say leading for that episode,
Yeah.
right? I don't know how they
Yeah,
fully
they
determined, but
they
it was
pick
all on her.
they pick what they apply for. So if they think it's more likely she'll do better in a supporting actress role, they're gonna nominate for her for supporting. If they think she's gonna do better in
Okay. Oh,
okay.
and I imagine it would be the same category that Genevieve O'Reilly gets, so I don't know which route they're gonna take.
Oh, I know, and
Yeah.
that's heartbreaking because they both deserve one.
Yeah.
Give Genevieve the lead, give, Elizabeth the, supporting. I
Yeah.
think getting a Best Supporting Actress Emmy for your first project is pretty freaking cool. So,
Yeah.
Right.
She
Yeah.
deserves it.
Yeah.
I mean, she's so
Right.
talented. Ultimately, she blows up some ships and causes all the Imperials to flee, which allows her access to Luthen. And this scene is heartbreaking. And you can tell she's struggling with this, and she turns off the machine that's keeping him alive, and kills him. And just the tears are the very soft tears. It's beautiful. But she can't waste any time, and she has to escape.
Yeah, and then that leads us into the next episode, Who Else Knows? Which I like that there's multiple episodes in this season that have a question as the
Hmm.
episode title, which doesn't feel like it's that common of a thing, but this is another one of those.
All right. Well, Clea makes her way from the hospital to the safe house. It is absolutely in disrepair to show us how time has passed.
It's amazing going from one year later how different it looks. I think uh I wouldn't have expected it to look so much worse just 1 year after Cassian and Mon Mothma are there for the handoff. But yeah, it's clearly not being used anymore. And I think that shows that Luthen is on the outs or was on the outs with the rebellion, with what he's doing. Is it's all starting to unravel and fall apart, and he can't keep these things up and running anymore.
And he knew this was going to happen eventually, it seemed like. I mean, he knew one day it would get away from him and he wouldn't be the one to finish this. So I don't know. Was he surprised that he lost this power?
I think with him is probably a mixed emotion because I feel like he's always from the get go said that he would never like live to see the end of this. Like he knew it would go beyond his time. But I also think he probably like most people, they don't expect things to happen as soon as they do. And I don't think he ever knew that a movement like what's going on in Yavin would occur. But at the safe house, she sends out the signal to go to Yavin, um, and letting our heroes know what's going on. But before we go there, we go to ISB security, where we see Dedra get interrogated by Krennic, and that scene was incredible. It felt like I was watching like The Dark Knight, where Batman like beats up Joker
Yes.
in the police cell because he comes in and he's so intimidating. Like I don't know that he's ever been intimidating before, but, like, the way they film it, like, you can't see his eyes. Like, it really does look like Batman. Like, he's, like, hulking over with his, like, cape, and you can't see his eyes. And he does that thing where, like, he puts his finger on top of her head. And,
Which was apparently
Yeah.
ad-libbed, right?
yeah, he had lived it,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It's
And,
great.
I think it was just so, like, such a great scene. Like, Deidre's just, like, watching her life fall apart, and she doesn't understand.
It's again, as we said, it's her ambition that has seen her downfall. She's been collecting information and searching everything for access, and so she's been holding on to all of this extra information that Lonnie has been able to get access to. He was able to kind of do a little hack, get into her code cert, get that information, and start to put that out into the world. And so Krennic thinks that he asks who else knows because it seems like she was working with him and now he's dead. And so something is clearly there's some leak, there's some loose thread out there. And it's her obsession with access that has led to this mistake that she could never picture.
He says some critic says something to the effect of, like, "How can you be so competent and yet so sloppy at the same time?" Like, he, like, is like, "It's hard to wrap your brain around." Like, what the amazing thing she's done so poorly.
And I love that it's the exact same for Krennic with having Galen Erso on
Yep.
the inside, right? It's the
Yeah.
same exact thing. He had put so much trust, so much faith in this person, and it's a mole. It's this person that is eventually causing their downfall, and it's the exact same thing.
He's ultimately gonna be in a very similar situation to Dedra later in Rogue One. It's interesting to see him be so competent here, and then in Rogue One, he's kinda bumbling. Well, Clea puts she breaks through the wall, she puts the communication device together at the safe house, um, and she sends out a message to Yavin. All the while, Hirt is trying to watch the film and figure out how Luthen died. I think it is so funny that they're speculating, "Oh, it has to be at least 3 people who came in and did this operation, and it wasn't, and it was just Clea, and it's just amazing.
I really liked them watching and catching just little corners, little glimpses of, the empire and how strong they are on surveillance and watching, but they can't get a clear image of it and get it perfectly centered right away. It takes them a while to figure out, oh, it was just one person.
Well, you know what they say, the more systems that, they tighten in their grip, something about slipping away. What's Princess Leia's thing?
That's profound.
Wow. You nailed it. The more you tighten your
The more
grip,
you
the more star systems will fall
S-
through your grasp.
Slip through your fingers,
the
yeah.
more you tight okay, so
Slip through
just
your
because we need to know.
yeah.
The more you tighten your grip, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
That beautiful George Lucas dialogue that sounds good on paper,
Yes.
but nobody can say.
I know, right?
And despite us having watched that movie 30, 40, 50, 100 times, we still can't quite nail that dialogue. I do love when Clea sends out that message, seeing Melshi and K2 and Cassian just kind of chilling, just hanging out on Yavin, playing some card games. I know Tony Gilroy talked that it was like a fraternity house on
Yeah.
Yavin, and I love that idea. Like we talk about the Imperials and being so severe and everything, and then the rebels, yeah, it's hard and that's not perfect for them, but they're relaxing. They're able to have fun and K2 certainly brings a lot of levity to the show, which is nice to have after such intensity.
It's interesting to watch this house turn from a home for 2 people in love into a frat house, and it's kinda sad. Poor Biggs.
Um, I will say this is like, I mean, it couldn't really be helped due to the structure of the season. But speaking of K2, I will say one of my very minor gripes about the season is that we don't get to see like K2 become K2. Like we see like just a snippet of it at the end of the last episode, and then we jump forward a year in time, and he's like already ingratiated into the group and everything. I think it would have been interesting to like watch that bond form. I think had the show been longer, we would have gotten that, but they definitely catch you up to speed very quickly. But it is a loss.
This is the, canon obsessive person in my head. It almost feels like we overwrote I know it was a dumb little comic book. It almost feels like we overwrote the comic book for just no reason.
Yeah.
It's not particularly profound that he found K2 on Gorman. It's not particularly necessary or relevant to the story, and they could have just introduced K2 in episode 10, and it would have just been or episode 11, I guess, and it would have just felt normal. Um, so those are my thoughts. I mean, I loved it. I love K2. So beautiful. Just my canon brain. Well, at this point, Wellman has a communicator and it's making noises.
Yeah, he's kept this communicator the whole time. When everyone on Yavin basically has cut from Luthen, Vel has cut from him, Cassian has cut from them, but Willman has held on to it. And so he's using it to try and figure out, oh, Luthen's messaging, it's a danger signal or we're in trouble signal, and he's able to get Cassian to try and go rescue him. And we talked about how Dedra does this operation to take Luthen against orders, and she pays for it. Cassian does the same thing. He takes the U-wing, they go without orders, they go without a flight plan, and thankfully theirs works out. But it's kind of that there again, we talk about the connections or the parallels between the Empire and the Rebels. And this is another one that I saw a very deliberate, like they're not following orders, just very different reasons why they're doing it. Killing someone versus saving someone.
So we go back to Coruscant and we see Kier go back for Dedra. He's on the outside, but he's going back to her for advice.
Kinda like Hannibal
It's a
Lecter.
nice little change. Yes, it's a little bit of a change in dynamic because in season one, he was like her intern basically. He was like very like eager to help and like just happy to help her do her job. And now he's like a totally different person. You can really see how the Empire has changed him into a much more like ruthless, like also like kind of sycophantic. Like he's just trying to advance himself. He's worried about his own neck. Because this is getting out of hand pretty quickly.
And Dedra is very much the same way, right? She's kind of saying, like, what is it? What's in it for me?
Yeah.
If I help you out, how is that going to help me in my situation right now? And so it's the Imperials are always looking out for themselves. They're not really about the cause, they're about themselves. I like that he gets the advice from Dedra to go look closer at things that they have overlooked, right? And they go back and reference Ferrex about the communicator that was found there. And so they start searching for that and they go to the shop and find it.
It's interesting to watch them decoding at the shop, and there's that decoder woman who's just very excited to be there, and she thinks it's really nifty. So that's fun. Um,
I love the look she got.
you know, right? Poor thing. She was just
Like,
excited.
this is not the time.
Yeah.
The Empire doesn't do excitement. They don't do
Yeah.
excitement. So at that point, they are trying to fix the communication system, and they start to hear the beeping noise, which eventually will lead them to their target.
And they kind of have a nifty little device that's tracking where else is that coming from. It basically becomes a race between the ISB and Cassian, Melshi, and K2 to try and get there first.
That was a really interesting device. It kinda looked like something else in science fiction, and I can't quite put my finger
It
on it.
looked like a divining rod, like, like
Is
it's
that
a
what it
thing
looked
that you
like?
used to
Find
that's just like
water?
a thing, like, where he was looking for, like, looking for water, it looked like that, like a electric version.
So that was really cool. And, we're racing, and, of course, the ISB and Cassian are trying to get to Clea first. And thank goodness, Cassian and Melshi get there first, along with our fan favorite K2SO.
Well, K2 is notably in the ship.
He sticks out a little
Oh, I'm
too
sorry, I was still
much.
and in my brain, we're
Yeah,
still on the ship. We're still on the ship
yeah,
in my brain.
Yeah, but they go into they go search in the safe house. And the benefit is Cassian has been there before,
Mhm.
so he knows exactly where to go. Whereas the ISB, they have to search around. They go to the wrong place
The
first, and so
poor
he knows
family.
exactly where to go. Yeah, yeah. Just interrupting dinner
yeah.
if they were watching or whatever, if they were watching TV or the HoloNet at that point.
It's interesting to me, Clea does not feel like she's gonna be welcomed on Yavin. I know that the group didn't like Luthen, but she seems to be I'm wondering why she thinks she's gonna be so hated, I suppose, when they've put so much on the line for the rebellion. At the very least, you would think they would tolerate her. Um,
Well,
she's
as
so
we see in
hesitant to
the
go.
I say as we see in the council scene with the rebel senate, they don't have any like, they have 0 respect for Luthen. Like, Mon kinda has some quiet respect, but Bale and the other senators, they don't really value what Luthen did for the cause. Um, and so I don't think Clea's fear, they're totally unfounded.
It's it's perhaps similar how the rebellion views Saw Gerrera, right? That this is someone who is outside of the bounds of their morality, and so they do not want to associate that person with them. And it if you're leading a organization that is against the main government, well, blowing things up, killing civilians, that's not going to put you in the hearts and minds of the public if you're trying to change a government. In that way, I think that's what the rebellion would want to do is to be in the hearts and minds of the civilians that the rebellion is good for them. Whereas maybe some of the things Luthen has done and Saw has done are bad for them and have affected citizens and just civilians very negatively.
Well, after the ISB is starting to arrive, we see K2 make his way towards the building, correct?
Yes, in a very haunting scene.
Very
Like,
haunting.
the early parts of the season, they showed us how scary the K2 droids can be, and Alan Tudyk does such a great job of making this, like, scary skeleton monster look like or sound like a friendly, like, part of the team, and then you just see him just pick people up and throw them. like like nothing. And obviously we get to the really like just horror movie scene where here gets shot up and Casey uses them as a shield.
Yeah, that
Terrifying.
yeah, yeah. That jumps like it's basically the start of that next episode, Jedha, Kyber, Erso. And you made a reference to the Dark Knight, and it makes me think of another one where he's in a dark tunnel, and the only thing that's illuminating him is the blaster fire, the gunfire.
Yeah.
And he's moving closer and closer, and all of a sudden we see him holding up here as a shield, which he's bulletproof, so he doesn't even need to do
Yeah,
that.
it's just
It's just more just terrible of using this guy as a human shield when he doesn't even need a shield.
was I can't say it's not befitting of here as a character.
Yeah.
Um, well, at this point, where it sounds like we're starting to move into our final episode of the whole show, Jedha Kyber Erso.
Three familiar words.
Three familiar
Yeah.
words that Clea had been repeating to herself and that she wanted Cassian to repeat to himself so that we can try to track down the big Imperial superweapon.
I was gonna say, like you said, she doesn't want to go. So she's trying to get them remember these words, burn it into your memory so you can pass it on because I'm not going, I'm not leaving. But finally they're able to get her to come.
I was actually shocked. I was completely expecting Clea to die in this episode. I was expecting her to die right now. And it was so exciting when she didn't die. She was just kinda after this part, this is kind of the end of her arc here. After this, she's just kinda there, and there's some grieving, of course, at the end. Um, but it's exciting to see that she made it to Yavin.
Yeah, this last episode is very much like the lead into Rogue One, right? And so we see a lot of things start to kind of assemble together. We see the Rebel Council, the same people that we see in Rogue One, debating whether they should do anything. They don't trust Clea and they don't trust this intel, which is very much they don't trust Jin in Rogue One. And so it's we see a lot of parallels with the way that they're acting and who's involved. We see Admiral Raditz, we hear Merrick, who's Blue Squadron leader. And so we see a lot more lead in right into Rogue One. And we later learn that it's just hours really before Rogue One starts.
What notable about the Rebel Senate is Bale is opposing Cassian. That's a very like unusual position for us to see Bail Organa in. He's always like on the side of our heroes and everything else we've had. Like he was the guy supporting Yoda and Obi Wan. He was the guy supporting Ahsoka. And in the novels, he was supporting Obi Wan in the Obi Wan TV show. And in Rogue One, he comes in and they play the Force theme, and it's like Bale's here to save the day. And then in this scene, he's like, Cassian, you're a loose cannon, and we're not going to trust you. It's a very like harsh scene. And, it's almost like doubled, in fact, because it's Benjamin Bratt instead of Jimmy Smith. It's like, this is very like, this is the Bale kind I know. But, but then you had this like a really like kind of powerful exchange where they were like, "When's the last time you even spoke to Luthen?" And Cassian says it's when I was helping rescue Senator Mahma from the Senate. And, they kind of all look at Bale, and that was Bale's fault. Like, it was
Right.
Bale's people that were infiltrated. It's kind of a reminder to all the people at the table that nobody's perfect in the rebellion.
It makes you wonder, like, okay, where were these other senators? Where was Senator Pam Lowe in all of this story? Because we've never seen them really anywhere else. And so they're so critical of them, but we didn't see them on Yavin the year before. We hadn't heard from them. And so they're so critical, but maybe it's just they are living in such a hard situation that they're overly sensitive. They're overly cautious about any potential leak, any potential misstep, because the Empire has the power to destroy them on a whim.
Because I would love another story that explores. I know that we just got Mask of Fear, but I would love another story that explores, senators during the reign of the Empire era. I think the Imperial Senate is so fascinating and such a hot mess. I'd be interesting to see more.
I can't remember if either of them are in the Mask of Fear novel. I know Senator Pamela is in Bad Batch, and she's in that Senate scene where they're like trying to pass like the clone rights bill, and she like speaks out in favor of the clones. But I don't think we've seen Jebel do anything notable, which really makes him have all the more audacity to be saying the things that he says.
Yeah.
We do see Senator Pamlo and Leia, Princess of Alderaan, but that's about it.
Oh, do we?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So Bad Batch, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, this episode, and Rogue One.
I'll have to read Leia, Princess of Alderaan, because it feels like it's also leading into this same story and revolving around a lot of the kind of similar themes, similar ideas of this rise of the rebellion, people joining up. So it feels like it's a natural connector.
It's got a lot of great Saw Gerrera stuff in it too.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay, yeah. Which this arc did
yeah.
not. We barely see Saw Gerrera. We see one message between him and Mon Mothma, and that's about it. Her warning him that there's a Star Destroyer over Jeddah, like they're coming, they know you're there, and he just blows her off and says, basically, doesn't matter. We're gonna do what we're gonna do, and it doesn't matter.
On a positive note, during the episode, Clea and Vel get some interaction time, which is kind of exciting. They get to patch things up a little bit.
Well, and it's notable too, because the last time we saw Vel and Clay together was at Lita's wedding, and it was like antagonistic. Like it was not up. It was a positive thing. She was like, "You haven't been working with us in a while. I don't know what you're doing, but you need to get back on your job because we have things to do." And Vel, Vel at that point had already been distancing herself from Luthen, and it's nice to see that like when Clay is at this really low point that'll there to bring her into the fold. And I'm really hoping that after the events of Star Wars Episode 4, that they are like off on a beach somewhere, like having a beach drink and like just chilling out because those girls have had enough stress. Like they need a moment to breathe.
They go hang out on a beach on Scarif.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh,
Oh.
no, no. Beautiful beaches, though.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Beautiful beaches.
Yeah. I mean, what a place to build your imperial compound.
Yeah.
So you have so little land, and maybe that's strategic, but also like, yeah, just hang out on a beach, eat a coconut or whatever it would be in Star Wars.
Fitting
Well,
to
she's
blow
gonna
up one
die
of
on a
the
planet.
1,000 desert planets that we.
I do like that Vel plays a further role with having Mon, like the connection between her and Mon Mothma as cousins, and Mon has her spy on Cassian to figure out why he trusts Clea, why he believes her. And instead of doing that, Vel just comes out and says, I want to know this. She doesn't beat around the bush. She doesn't try and like trick him into saying something. She just is very straightforward with him, which is kind of a breath of fresh air, honestly, for these people who have lived in shadows for so long that they don't have to do that as much anymore.
I think it shows how much she'd grown since Gorman and since his death. She spent that time away from Cinta because Cinta was doing spy stuff and everything. And I think it's pretty clear that Vel's just kind of over it. Like she's ready for like open conflict. Like she's not here to do spying anymore, especially not amongst her own people. And so just
Right.
going and casting away, and it gets the result she needs. Like she goes and she asks him what it is, and he tells her what the situation is, and that definitely brings, resolution to the conflict.
Yeah, and they have kind of a resolution to the people that they've lost together, right? They're the only two survivors now from the Aldani heist. And
Mhm.
so they drink to them, and it's kind of this is what kicked off this entire thing on Yavin. And we're the only ones that were there doing it now. All of those other people have been lost, and they pretty much drink to them, and they are mythologized. Like people almost, I think they say something like, people have claimed that they were there. And I kind of love that. That's so interesting to think about how that story has become mythology amongst the rebellion, is people claiming that, like, oh yeah, I was there, I did that.
Well, and it's not just mythology amongst the rebellion, because Nimic's manifesto has made it out into the public consciousness,
Oh
Fascinating.
yes.
and we see Partagast, leader of the ISB, listening to that manifesto as his I don't know his second in command's name comes in to tell him that he needs to report to Imperial Command. And I think it's telling Horrigas was listening to that, at that moment in time. It was particularly the part about how the Empire won't be able to last because it's just gonna continuously eat itself, and, these episodes have shown us that. You know, Dedra was willing to give up Cyril, Kit was willing to give up Dedra, and, you know, Portagas, who has, you know, done, by Imperial standards, like, really incredible things. He's made a large mistake that's resulted in the Death Star formation getting out. They weren't able to capture Cassian, and now he's going to pay a price. And we don't know exactly what that price was going to be, but he decided that taking his own life was the best course of action. I thought that was such a powerful scene when he asked his lieutenant to give him a moment to collect his thoughts, and he steps outside, and the lieutenant stops the stormtroopers from intervening, and you hear the blaster go off.
He knew he was about to kill
You
himself
knew.
because it was better than what was ever gonna happen next.
Right. I love that in Nemec's manifesto, we also hear the phrase about oppression is the mask of fear, talking about like the Mask
Yes.
of Fear book and all the connections between how the empire operates. They operate on a standpoint of fear. They want people to be afraid. They themselves are afraid of these things. And so they try and clamp down harder. And the as we said earlier, the more they clamp down, the more things slip through their fingers that lead to their downfall. So they are the immediate cause of their downfall. Their ambitions, their fighting amongst each other. We even see that between Blevin and Dedra in the first season is what causes them to have downfall. If they just coordinated, if they worked together for the betterment of each other, these things wouldn't have happened, but they can't do that.
Well, we're about to round out the end of the episode here. Cassian, of course, has a mission, and he's finally given approval by Bale to go to Kafrene to meet Tivik, his contact that we see at the beginning of Rogue One.
I love that when Bale is talking with Cassian, he says, "If I want to go down fighting the Empire, I want to go down swinging." And it broke my heart knowing that just a few hours later, a few days later, he's not going to be able to fight. He doesn't go down swinging. He puts it into motion with Leia and the plans for the Death Star, but he's just on the planet that gets blown up, and there's no recourse of action for him to try and fight back. They get so caught off guard, and it really broke my heart to hear him say, "I want to go down swinging," and he doesn't fully get that opportunity to know what's coming his way.
Well, if you think about it, that's really in line with all the deaths on Andor. Like, Cinta doesn't die gloriously, Nimik doesn't die gloriously, Lonnie Young doesn't die gloriously, Luthen doesn't. You know, they just kinda die, and, that's, like, unfortunately what the Empire does. Bale and Bray are kind of the ultimate examples of that. These two like mythical figures in the rebellion doing these grand things. And they just get blown up.
Maybe they escaped at the last second, and they're on a beach on Scarif after it was blown up.
After it was blown
They're
up.
like an ashen beach.
Yeah, a little smoky.
Now that we're at the end here, we're going to see a quick montage of kind of where all of our characters are sitting. First, we see Cassian heading to Kafrene. He's bringing K2 with him. They're on the ship. And we see Melshi running and leading a training exercise with our favorite friend from Rogue One.
Pow!
Ow.
Oh,
Oh, Terabast!
Caravan. um,
I love it.
and Speaking about Cassian real quick, going to Kafrine, one of the first things we knew about this show was they said it was going to go right up against Rogue One. They said like
hmm
it was going to end like immediately before, and it could not have been. Like, the only thing it could have done more is if we saw Cassian like walking down the alleyway up to Tivik.
Mhm.
Like it could not have been more flesh up against it. Um, and then I think it was really great. You know, Melshi going back and rewatching, I will touch on a second, seeing Melshi in Rogue One, he didn't stand out to me at all on my first few times I watched Rogue One, but watching it again now, seeing Melshi was really great. It was cool seeing him lead those troops on an exercise that looks just like it's filmed just like it looks in the movie. It's a nice connection there.
We do see that which is against what I was expecting. Dedra is not has not been executed. She's in prison, and I'm not sure. I guess it's a Narkina 5 style prison. Is Narkina 5 still around? I know there was a prison break, but it was still a prison, I think, right?
I believe Tony Gilroy said it is in the same system, and it might be Narkina 2 or Narkina 7.
Ah, okay.
But it really drives that theme home that, you know, nobody benefits in the Empire but the Emperor. You know, all these people are just cogs in this machine. It doesn't matter. You know, Dedra was willing to give her life up for this cause, and they did not care about her in the slightest. And because she was trying her best to serve the empire. She found herself put in prison, and you know she probably died there. You know the conditions of this prison were really awful, and you know the war went on for another 4 years, and they were making you know military machinery. And I can't imagine the demand for that went down over the course of the war.
It's interesting throughout the show to watch her chasing. I don't know if promotion's the right word, but she keeps chasing security. Like, she's looking for security for her and Cyril. Partagaz kind of references, "Hey, you're gonna be safe with it, this is a safe place for you to be within this particular, assignment." Um, and the further she gets into her career, the more dangerous it is for her until ultimately she pays the price for it. Failure is not tolerated.
I like that her in prison is then juxtaposed with Mon and Vel just together in the rebel mess hall eating together, and it's very much again a contrast to the Imperials where they're you know a little bit high and mighty on themselves, and this is Mon Mothma, the leader of the rebellion, just eating in the regular old mess hall with everyone. She's just there amongst the people and chatting and talking with them and all of that. And I think that's really kind of a cool parallel to see the rebel perspective and how they get along versus the imperial perspective.
Also, I would be remiss if we didn't mention at some point that Mon's beautiful hair was lost
That
to
was
how they
Oh,
styled it in Rogue One.
That
it
was
was it
just
was
one of the
brutal.
most upsetting parts of this entire season was watching
That was
her
probably like
hair
my
just
third least favorite death of the show.
we knew it was gonna happen. We came into this knowing that her hair was gonna look the way it did, and I'm glad at least there was some continuity between Rogue One and Andor, although I would have forgiven them for just letting her
Yeah,
keep her nice hair.
if they,
It's horrifying. Her hair is horrifying.
I,
It's really bad.
I would have been willing to accept that she got a haircut between the end of Andor and the morning of that Rogue One starts.
Like, she just got a really bad haircut. Everyone gets
Yeah.
one now and then. Um, we do see this again contrasted with we see Perrin again. Yay,
yeah.
Perrin! And he's super redeemed because he's in the back of a car with Renai Skolden, which is just intriguing in of itself. I wonder what happened there. It feels like I'm feeling a fair. I'm feeling a fair. It's
Oh yeah.
always an affair.
I mean, she was
And
sleeping in his lap. I don't, I don't know how else you
yeah,
would.
I don't think it's even just implied. I think it slaps you in the face.
It makes you wonder what is the rest of Mon Mothma's family up to, and I'm kinda curious if we'll ever find out what happens to them after this episode.
Well, I know that Tony Gilroy did talk that there was a deleted scene of Mon Mothma and Perrin, where Perrin talks like, "Hey, I knew what you were doing the whole time. Like, if you had trusted me, I would have helped you. I would have been there for you." But she didn't, and I'm curious if like any rarely it feels nowadays do deleted scenes get released, or I'm not sure if they filmed it or they just
I
wrote
didn't film
it.
it.
Oh, they
He said
didn't
that
film it.
they
Okay,
said it was a thing they had talked about, what they decided against.
okay,
Um,
okay.
and, you know, honestly, I think it actually works out. Yeah, I think there would be some, like, poetry to Perrin, having known about Mon the whole time, and Mon, like, not realizing that, and he could have been a benefit to her and everything. But I think that's not the show Andor is. I think Andor is the show that Mon separated her personal and private life, and because of that, she let her personal life die off,
Hmm.
at the cost of the rebellion, and she neglected her marriage and her daughter, um, and that's what it led to sadness for everyone all around,
Except for Bix.
except for
Where
Biggs.
what a lovely reveal.
Well, before we get to Bix, I don't want to forget Cleo, because Cleo is actually my favorite in the montage. because we see Clea looking out at the sunrise, and that's a callback to Luthen saying he's like dying for a sunrise we'll never get to see, and
Mm.
Clea gets to see the
Oh,
sunrise.
I love
Um,
it.
yeah, and I think that was a beautiful tribute to Luthen. I don't think anybody's under the pretense that Luthen was going to make it out of this show. But seeing his apprentice, if you will, get to see that sunrise, I think was a really beautiful moment. It was.
And now we have Nyx.
We get the Bix, and then probably the most important character, the one that I was waiting to see, B2 Emo.
Yes.
Oh,
Amina
yay!
Rao.
It was nice. It was nice of them to give us that little snippet of B2, know that he was safe.
Yeah, yeah, it
Um,
was it was a nice ending. I really honestly, I didn't expect Bix at the end. I thought kind of the stories has just moved past her, right? That yeah, like it was a big part of the first 2 arcs, but now she isn't a part of this story anymore. But I like that that was included. I like that idea, and I've seen people go a little bit too far with suggesting like Jason Sindula and now Cassian and Bix's child are the same age and stuff. No, don't do that. That makes the universe too small. But I do like that they just hopefully live a good life.
I hope so too.
Well, and that's what the rebellion's for, is for people to like live normal lives. I think a beautiful tribute to Cassian would be Dix and their child getting to, live out their days um, in peace.
And that's the series of Andor, a Star Wars story. It was beautiful.
And it leads right into Rogue One.
And it leads right into Rogue One. This is absolutely, I mean, it's the best Star Wars show. Um, in my opinion, I put it up there. My favorite Star Wars is Rogue One, Revenge of the Sith. I put it right up there with those two for me. Um, it was stunning. A question I've seen talked about a lot on online right now is Star Wars ever going to be this good again? What are your thoughts?
I have to believe. I want to believe that it will. Because I think there's going to be a difference. This is one way, one style that Star Wars can be really great. And to think that it will never be this good again is too depressing for me. It's too sad. I love this. This was really great, but I also love the goofiness of Star Wars. I love the humor of Star Wars. I love the philosophy of Star Wars. I like all of that different stuff, and to me that's all Star Wars. And so this is really great and I love it and I'm just floored with it, but I don't want it to be the best that Star Wars will ever be because then we'll always compare it to that, and that's what I'm nervous about is we'll always compare it to this, and it's happened every time a new really great Star Wars thing has come out or a new Star Wars thing that people didn't like, and they're wrong about that, but they always compare it to something being bad. I don't want that to happen.
I think if, people always talk about what lessons do, the studios learn from like the successes and failures of their products. And if there's lessons they take away from this, I think one is that you can tell like really compelling stories that are not related to the Skywalker saga. I think that's like one like in universe thing I hope they learn. But like, the broader thing I hope they learn is that, Tony Gilroy is not a big Star Wars fan. And most of the like crew on this show, most of the writers and directors and everything were not massive Star Wars fans, and I hope that one of the things they learned from this is that you can bring in outsiders, that you can bring in fresh perspectives and get a product that is true to the spirit of Star Wars. And the other thing too is I hope they learn, like, I don't think it just had to be like dramas for this to be the case, but I hope that they shoot for this level of quality. Like this type of storytelling where it's like, really tight, uses artistic, symbolism and everything. You can tell a story about a Jedi that is, this powerful. Um and I think there's room for that.
And saying Star Wars will never be this good again. I feel like it's also disparaging all of the amazing Star Wars that came before, I put this up there with some of the best Star Wars, but Star Wars is so different, and there's so many different kinds of Star Wars, and, we always hear people say, "This is the best Star Wars since the '80s," and it's like, so there was nothing of value in the '90s, the 2000s, 2010s. There was a significant amount of value from that time period, and I don't like this narrative that, "Oh, we're not optimistic that Star Wars will ever be good again." It's gonna be amazing. It's Ahsoka season 2 is gonna be amazing. Like, just because it's a different kind of amazing doesn't mean it's not still amazing. Dave Filoni's Star Wars is very, very different than Tony Gilroy's Star Wars, and that's why Star Wars is so fun. We get to see so many different perspectives, so many different storytellers come in and tell their story. Certainly, there's some Star Wars that's not as much fun as other Star Wars, or perhaps is as well put together. But it's still Star Wars, and it's still fun, and it still makes us smile, and it's still fun to talk about. And I'm sure that no matter what comes out next, we're still gonna be excited to talk about it, and watch it be even better than this. I'm very optimistic.
Austin, I think you hit on something that I've tried to hold on to throughout my career, I'll say, of watching Star Wars, being a Star Wars fan, is I try and always go into whatever new project is coming out, whatever new show or new movie or game or comic or whatever, expecting to enjoy it. I expect to enjoy it, and that has always made it be easier to enjoy it. Is I look for those things that I really like about it, whether it's this or Ahsoka season 2, Mandalorian, Last Jedi, Phantom Menace, all of those things. I look for what I enjoy about those things, and that has impacted me to say I can look at things that I love. I don't really have one movie that's my favorite. I have this movie is my favorite for this reason, or that part of that movie is my favorite, sequence. This is the favorite for cinematography. This is my favorite music, and it exists throughout the entirety of the saga, throughout the entirety of the canon.
Do you wanna say there is a best movie for music, and it's Revenge.
Duel of the Fates would disagree.
I think Phantom Menace is in the chat and would like to have a word with you.
Ooh,
Sounds like it's
no,
a
no,
2 to 1
no, no, no,
argument
But,
there.
no. Okay, let's go ahead and agree the prequel movies have the best music of all of Star Wars.
I don't know
Ray's
if I'm gonna
theme is
fight you on that
really
one,
good
but
though.
it's
Don't
that's
fight me on
tough.
it.
Ray's
Ray's
theme
theme
is
is
really
really
good,
good,
really good.
but there's
The
more really good themes
But
in
this
Star
is
Wars
what I'm
or
talking
like,
there
about. Is
tune
like,
into a whole episode
yeah,
about
like
this.
I know
Tune
this is gonna
into
be
a
a
whole
whole
episode
yeah,
about
episode.
this
but
later
this
in
is
the
exactly what I'm talking about, is that
podcast.
there's good spread throughout the entirety of it. Everything is there, and you can find the good if you try and look for it, if you want to try and focus on it. If you look for the negative, that's what you're going to find, and you're not going to enjoy it. You're not going to have a good time.
Well, and also, like, if you're, like, one of those people where it's like, "Oh, this is the best thing since, The Empire Strikes Back," for exa that's the thing people always compare it to, and I think what you have to, like, put yourself in the headspace of is, think about, like, the best meal you've ever had. Like, you have, like, a really, really great meal you had at a fancy restaurant or something, and that was the best you ever had. That doesn't mean you haven't had good meals between then and now. And it doesn't mean that, like, you haven't had eaten a lot of good things. Star Wars is that way. Like, we all have, like, our favorite thing, but that doesn't mean that every meal doesn't have something to offer.
And if you sat and complained every time you ate food that this isn't as good as something I had
Yeah.
40 years
So maybe
ago,
food
you
isn't for
probably
you.
need to reexamine your life.
Yeah, maybe you don't like
Maybe food
food.
isn't for you. Maybe
Like
you
that
don't
one thing,
like
and
food.
that one thing is still there
Maybe
for
you
you to
just like
have,
that
and you can
one
go have that
thing.
thing.
Which
You can eat that every day.
I
You can
do
still
wanna
eat that
clarify,
every day if you
you are
want.
still you still like food, you just like a very, very specific type of food, but please let the rest of us enjoy all the other beautiful foods that are put out for us. Regardless, Andor was amazing. I think we can all agree it's some of our favorite Star Wars. It's so well put together. It's such a tight production. Um, it's definitely gonna be something I'm excited to rewatch for years to come.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting to see where Star Wars goes from here. We know Ahsoka season 2 is in the works, but beyond that, for live action shows, there's nothing that we're aware of. There's nothing on the docket right now.
It all leads to Heir to the Empire.
Yeah,
I'm
we
I'm
came out
really
of
excited for that movie.
Celebration, we really don't have that mu like, there's still a lot of mystery about what's coming down the line. We've got the Darth Maul animated show, we've got Ahsoka season 2, and there's 2 movies in like active development right now. The Sean Levy film and production, which is post episode 9, if I'm not mistaken. And then we've got Mandalorian Grogu, which comes out next spring, and the Rey movie. That's supposed to start sometime in the not too distant future, which I'm very excited about. Of all the things announced, that's the one I'm most
Ray,
most excited
love
for.
her.
But and all of those things besides Mandalorian and Grogu, like those are all pretty far off. So it would not surprise me if the reception of Andor leads to some changes to the projects coming down the line.
I just really hope they learn the right lesson from this show.
Which honestly, Andor's so good, I don't know if there's many wrong lessons you could take from it.
Do you want me to tell you what the wrong lesson would be? We need to make more content for the Rise of the Empire era.
Yeah, that would be the one. That would be the wrong.
That's the wrong lesson.
That would be the wrong
Stop
lesson.
making content. I mean, let me rephrase that. We love content in the Rise of the Empire era, but let's explore some other eras too.
Yeah.
Speaking of other areas to explore, where does this take us as a podcast? Really, when we started, it was in the build up to Andor season 2, and now that that's done, we kind of have a open lane to explore Star Wars and talk more about it. So, what are we going to be doing next?
Well, I hate to break it to everyone that this is our last podcast. Uh, it has been too hard.
This is as good as the podcast will
I'm
ever
really not
get.
passionate about exactly. Will this podcast ever get better than this? Yeah, it'll get a lot better than it's only gonna get better. Well, we're gonna be talking about a few cool things. We can talk about Tales of the Underworld. We can talk about our favorite, rankings of Star Wars movies. Austin, you mentioned a couple other things.
Yeah, we got a couple things down the line. 2 of the Rogue 3 are headed down to Galaxy's Edge soon, so that'll be fun. We can do some episodes about that, but also let us know what you'd like to see. Comment on our socials and let us know what you're interested in. We'd love to get that feedback and do some things interacting with y'all.
Yeah, and then in 2 weeks from now, you will hear us talk about Tales of the Underworld, diving into Asajj Ventress and Cad Bane. But until then, this is Rogue 3 signing off.
Thanks everyone for joining us to talk about the galaxy far, far away. You can find us on Instagram, Blue Sky, YouTube, and TikTok as Rogue 3 Media. We look forward to talking with you at the next rendezvous point.